Welcome to my review of Suicide Squad, directed by David Ayer, an action film that follows an array of hardened criminals who are forcibly given a task, courtesy of government official Amanda Waller, to save Midway City from an ancient entity capable of magical mass destruction. So I'm going to begin this review with this. If you saw my Batman v Superman review back when it came out in March, then you would know that I didn't love it. In fact, I quite hated it. And even though the first and second acts aren't incredibly offensive, I did find them to be quite dull and very messy. But really, what put the nail into the coffin for me was the third act. I just think it's just quite awful. But as for Suicide Squad, what really got me interested in this film, apart from David Ayer's involvement with the film, who of course directed films such as End of Watch and Fury, what really piqued my interest and what really made this film become my most anticipated film of the summer of 2016 was that second trailer, the trailer featuring Bohemian Rhapsody. I think that is a fantastic trailer. However, just about a month ago, the soundtrack listings came out and I saw that Bohemian Rhapsody was included. However, it wasn't being performed by Queen. It was being performed by Panic at the Disco. That really is where I started to look at Suicide Squad and think that, yeah, DC, they're gonna fuck it up again. And of course, there are these horrible reviews that this movie has been receiving. I mean, it's pretty low. As for me, I don't know whether it's because I went in with such low expectations, but I kinda actually liked it. That said, I don't think that this is a great movie. I think it is flawed as hell. However, there's something kind of charming about it. And I really do feel like that David Ayer actually gave a shit. Unlike Zack Snyder, who just doesn't understand the material at all. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is the use of music. And earlier I mentioned Panic at the Disco being on the soundtrack, and thankfully they're nowhere to be heard in this film. In fact, the actual soundtrack consists of mostly retro music than contemporary, something that goes along with the trailers, the trailers that had sort of a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe to them. And despite the music being used as a very noticeable crutch to liven up the film, it serves its purpose, and a lot of the music is really quite good. It's not as masterfully incorporated as a Martin Scorsese film or Guardians of the Galaxy for the matter. In other words, you can tell the music was added in later after BVS received such shitty reception. But again, it makes the film fun. Another thing that I want to praise this film for is that I do like how David Ayer introduces us to the Suicide Squad. In the first act of the film, there's a scene that features Viola Davis, who plays Amanda Waller. She's talking to these other officials. She's going through all these case files that feature Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, etc. There, the film provides some backstories to these characters. Some are longer than others, like Deadshot's and Harley Quinn's. Even though that it does feel maybe a little awkward in the film, and it does feel maybe a little long, I feel like David Ayer did a really good job taking on that challenge. Especially Deadshot's, although I do have one problem with Harley Quinn's. It's sort of shot and edited in a way that sort of gives off that fever dreamish, mad look to it. In theory, I think it works, but as for the film, I don't know. I just felt it kind of looked a little cheap and trashy.
What are you gonna do? You gonna kill me, Mr. J?
What? Oh, I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
Now, I'll talk about characters after I say this. All the trailers that sort of gave off a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe, it's pretty true to the film. This really is sort of a comedy. And I did find it to be relatively funny, and apparently the audience that I was with, they found it to be funny as well, because they were laughing pretty much up until midway through the second act, because that's when it kind of switches and becomes a little bit more serious. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about characters, because when I start talking about characters, I'm gonna kind of slowly start to transition into the things that I don't like about Suicide Squad. First thing that I love, Will Smith as Deadshot. This is pretty much his film. He carries it, really provides a lot of the emotional weight in the film, has a nice backstory, well executed. Next up is Viola Davis, who plays Amanda Waller, who is very intimidating in the role. I mean, that is one stone cold bitch. Another character that I really like is surprisingly Captain Boomerang, who's played by Jai Courtney. And a lot of people talk crap about Jai Courtney. They say that he's a terrible actor in other films. Then again, I wouldn't know because I've never seen any films with Jai Courtney. But here, I thought he was quite good. Nice comedic timing, a bit one note, but I had some good fun with that character. As for other characters, characters that I felt relatively indifferent towards, members of the Suicide Squad. Here are some names: Killer Croc, El Diablo, there's Slipknot, and there's Katana. So now you're probably wondering, what about those other characters, two of the biggest characters in the entire film? Well, I haven't forgot about them. So I'll start with Harley Quinn, who is played by Margot Robbie. Now, the construction of Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad isn't just exclusive to Margot Robbie. It's also credited to David Ayer, who wrote and, of course, directed the film. There were times where I liked what she was doing. There were times where I thought the character was quite faithful to Harley Quinn, how she is in the TV show, the comics, the video games, etc. But there are times where she wasn't, and there are times where she was attempting, or should I say they, David Ayer and Margot Robbie, were attempting to go for something that was faithful, and it just became cringy. There are some things that work better in a live-action format, and Harley Quinn, she is a tricky character to pull off. She's so inconsistent in terms of the characterization. I mean, she is all over the place, and Margot Robbie's accent is really no different. Sometimes her comedic delivery works, but more often than not, it kind of falls a little flat. Which is unfortunate, because I do like the Harley Quinn character. I do find that there is something charming about that character, and there's something charming about her here in Suicide Squad. But really, her whole thing, just everything about her, inconsistent as hell. There are times where she's just completely mad, completely out there, and other times she just seems like she's just being played by Margot Robbie. And there's actually one scene in the film, it's like, really? I don't think Harley would have that reaction to the story that a character reveals later on in the film, but it's, yeah. So with Harley now out of the way, let's talk about the Joker, played by Jared Leto. And going into this film, I was very much excited to see how he was going to portray him, because I loved Jared Leto's performance in Dallas Buyers Club. I think Jared Leto is an incredibly talented actor, and ever since he was announced to play the Joker, I was actually excited about that, because I was like, okay, he seems like a good choice. And going off of the trailers, despite not being the biggest fan of the tattooed look, I was still very much intrigued. As for how he is in the actual film, though, well, first of all, what he's doing is not Joker. It's just simply not. He's like playing him way, way too far gone. Joker, yeah, he's mad, but he's not like stupid mad. I don't know if it's because the tattoos or what, but he really seems more like Zaz than Joker. He's so out of it to the point where it made me wonder, how the hell does this guy even dress himself, let alone have like a gang of people who fight for him? So that was my first point. Second point, the performance itself, it's fucking awful. The whole time throughout the movie, he talks like this. It's like Heath Ledger, but if he were drunk and sucked.
What?
He's not in the movie that much, but when he does appear on screen, I did find it to be somewhat painful at times. And there's one scene in particular featuring Harley and Joker that's just so unfaithful to their relationship. As I mentioned earlier, my biggest complaint with Batman v Superman was the third act. And I'll be damned if this does not fall to the same exact problem that BVS did. Except here, it actually might be worse than BVS's. It's really bad. If you've ever seen Gods of Egypt, or you saw those trailers, I'm sure you did, before Star Wars, it's like that, kinda. The antagonist in this film is a character called Enchantress, and she is essentially the typical omnipotent big baddie with motivations of world domination. In other words, every villain that has pretty much appeared in every other summer blockbuster this summer. Her motivations are never explored. She is a boring character, and pretty much any kind of set piece that is relative to her is pretty uninspired, in my opinion. Basically, what she can do is that she can possess people, and when she does that, they become like these multiple-eyed tar monsters. So in other words, that is what the Suicide Squad is fighting throughout the entire film. Multiple enemies that all look exactly the same. And going back to the third act, that really is where the movie, no pun intended, takes a gigantic nosedive and commits suicide, because it's actually quite embarrassing how bad the CGI is in that segment of the film, especially on the Enchantress. The shit's laughable. It's like you had a movie in the first and second acts that were flawed and kind of messy, but were genuinely trying, to where in the third act, it just said, fuck it. That's where a lot of the dialogue, albeit that there are bad moments sprinkled throughout the film, is at its worst. It's where one character straight up makes a transformation that just comes out of nowhere. Though one good thing I can say about this movie that it has going for it is that since it's so carefree, I'm not as pissed off at it as I was with Batman v Superman, a movie that did take itself seriously. Even then, talking about all this, the third act, I'm kind of reevaluating my rating right now. That said, it is just a rating. By all means, go and see the film for yourself, form your own opinion, preferably at a matinee price. And there are some things that I liked about the film that I didn't mention, one of which being that I like how this film takes a bunch of anti-heroes and makes them into people with depth, most specifically Deadshot. Before I give my rating, I do have some things to say, things that I forgot to say while doing my review, and one thing that kept on popping up in my head as I was watching the film was that why exactly did Amanda Waller have Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, and especially somebody like Captain Boomerang? Why does she have them on the team? I mean, I get that they're disposable, they're criminals. At the same time, it's like, well, they're kind of useless. Or at least they're useless when going up against somebody like the Enchantress. Now, if it were the Joker, like how it is in the animated film Assault on Arkham, it would have probably made sense to have Harley Quinn there. These are not trained soldiers, and this whole debacle with the Enchantress, from what I can see, it's actually pretty damn avoidable if people had just used their brains. Moreover, going back to the Joker, the thing about him is that he's supposed to be charismatic. I mean, hell, it's hard not to like the Joker. That's how he got people such as Harley, that's how he got his goons. And here, he's not charismatic at all, and he lacks critical thinking skills, or at least he seems to. I really find it difficult to believe that this guy could actually match up to the world's greatest detective. No. I don't mind originality at all. Heath Ledger's was original, but it stayed true to the essence of that character. That was the Joker if the Joker were in a real life setting. This isn't the Joker at all. Like Harley Quinn, I'm not going to deny that capturing the Joker in a live action format is a bitch, but it needs to be portrayed by somebody who actually understands the character, and unfortunately, I just don't think Jared Leto does, or at least David Ayer doesn't. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that. As for anything else, I did sort of sense that there were scenes that were cut as I was watching the film. It's not as bad as BVS's, but it is something that I did notice. So with all that said, I'm going to give Suicide Squad a very strong 2.5 out of 5. If it were not for the third act, this would easily be a strong 3, but unfortunately that's in the film, so yeah, I can't do that. If you are somebody who has seen Suicide Squad, then do let me know your thoughts on it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And as always, I'm Colin Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.